Anybody listening, if you're listening to us on one of the 25 radio stations, we greatly appreciate that. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, or Rumble, the list goes on and on. We hope you like, subscribe, and share this interview. We have a very special guest, Dr. Ben Tapper, twc.health/fire for 10% off your order. We've teased this quite a few times on our program. He does work for the wellness company, as many other doctors we've interviewed on the program past, and will continue to interview these doctors in the present as a lot of these issues keep coming up on topic in general. The wellness company is pushing these great products out, nutraceuticals. They have the contagion kits. We hear a lot about the bird flu, obviously spike support, Dr. McCullough involved in that. You can look into that, and also the emergency medical kit. Again, it's twc.health/FIRE for 10% off your order. And you can find more about Dr. Ben Tapper on Twitter. It's at Dr. Ben Tapper, TAPPER1. And he has other places which we will tease in just a moment. But I will shut up and let Dr. Tapper talk. It's a pleasure meeting you, sir, and I'm grateful that you came on here. And thanks so much for fighting the good fight against the medical tyranny that's really started in high gear, I should say, the past 4 years.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, brother. It's good to be here, and I'm just thankful to be talking about, what we're going to be talking about, because obviously these conversations need to be the forefront here, and there is absolutely, there's corruption in our pharmaceutical industry. There's corruption in our government. There's an absolute evil agenda at play here, and people are starving for this information. So the more we can be talking about it, the better.
Well, listen, just to start off, in 2020, I was very much in the liberal hysteria. That's my word for it. I was very far to the left. Bernie Sanders guy, AOC girl, the list goes on and on. I was following these people. I voted for these people all my life, Doc. And what happened is when I got injured by the shot back in 2021 after my second dose of it, no one believed what was going on with me. And I've heard this from many other people that are injured by this shot. I was told that I should take antidepressants, benzodiazepines. I'm a person that was an athlete throughout college, athlete my whole life, obviously. And I kind of saw something was wrong in the medical field that I had trust in throughout my life, Doc. And I've heard this through and many other interviews with many other doctors, such as your colleagues, and also many other injured, that something really hyped up in 2020. So let's go back into time and tell the viewers and the listeners what was going on with you in 2020, because I know your dad was a doctor, so you were brought up with, suspect against these medical shots.
Right. I mean, there was a lot to just this whole thing, and it runs so much deeper than just 2020, and it runs so much deeper than what we might realize. But I grew up in this household, like you mentioned, with this kind of ideology and a natural path mindset. As a kid, we didn't get the shots. We went all natural. We had, if I were sick, I would get zinc and probiotics, and we didn't really fear disease. And so, prior to that, I kind of grew up in that mindset in this household. But, there was things that came my way that we would talk about. And I do believe it was a divine intervention. I think God brought things to my plate that were to shine a light on a lot of this corruption. To give you an example, I took my staff years ago to take a tour of a school, and the school I went to, grad school, and to get my doctorate. And I had, one of the tour guides had an article that was written during the Spanish flu. And in that article is actually really interesting, because it talked about how they were there to push during the Spanish flu, they were manipulating data. They had people say, wear a mask, and they had social distancing laws, businesses deemed essential, non-essential. And they said, basically, there's nothing you can do. Just wait till this new experimental jab comes around. And that's exactly what they pushed. They pushed an experimental influenza jab that was being pushed 100 years ago. And the statement from the AMA was a direct statement 100 years ago, state that they stated that, there's been no trials adequately demonstrating a decrease after the shot. And so why would you want to be experimented on? And so if you fast forward today, a lot of the package inserts say the same exact thing. The verbiage is the same. And so this, would pique my interest. And so I wanted to know more. I wanted to know exactly what is happening. I really became an expert in the field, especially from the data standpoint and data side of things. I would talk about how they're manipulating data, and they've been doing it for, I kept a keen eye on it for now. It's been 16 years. I feel like an old man saying that, but it's been 16 years now since I've been keeping a keen eye on this, and how they've been manipulating data for as long as I've been keeping an eye on it. And how long have they been doing this? And so when COVID hit, it really did shine a light on the corruption from a mass scale. I mean, from what I've been following, it was huge, but this was like global, because influenza is up and disappeared. And we saw massive corruption in the National Vital Reporting System of the CDC, which is the data subdivision of the CDC. And so we were like, oh, wow, this is occurring on a global scale. And why aren't people talking about it? So, and that raised a lot of questions too. Not only that from the data side of things, but also the draconian bills that were coming our way prior to 2020. We had bills that are coming our way to take away our rights and freedoms to refuse a pharmaceutical product. And that is not right. So that's what really got me into this fight.
I want to ask you this because, obviously you as well as I know a lot of senior citizens. We have them in our lives. Maybe we have them as friends, and they do trust the person in the white coat and think that that person is Jesus Christ and they can do no harm, do no wrong. Even some young people, middle-aged people think the same thing. That's how I used to think too. Obviously, until this happened to me, now I have a lot of suspicion on the person with the white coat. And I am more towards what you were when you were a young man, thinking, and even the wellness company in general, looking at the nutraceuticals, looking at my whole body, what I'm putting into it, whether it's a nutraceutical, whether it's a medication, whether it's food in general. I want to make sure I put the best, food, nutraceuticals, medication into my body if needed. But we see a lot of people, have woken up, but a lot of people are still in this hysteria.
Yep.
What is that? Is that some sort of mental health issue that we're seeing going on in the country, that people still are living in this fake, phony 2020 world?
Well, I mean, I believe that's scriptural. I believe this is psychological, spiritual warfare in the people. I mean, there's scripture that talks about the enemy will blind the unbelievers. I mean, right now we have a people that are just completely blinded to this agenda. And make no mistake, there is an agenda being pushed here. I mean, look at the global World Economic Forum's Agenda 21. Now we have Agenda 2030. People say this is conspiracy, and then they don't want to talk about it. And really, it's and if we want true liberty in this country, if we want true freedom, then we must be united. And we see more division right now in our country. We see more compartmentalization in our healthcare, in our sciences, in our education, and our political views now more than ever before. And that's what the enemy wants. They want us to be compartmentalized so they can control us. And that is the absolute problem here. We need to be united. We need to come together, but the soil for truth right now is rich. The soil for freedom is rich, and we must be proactive in this fight right now. We must get our heads out of the sand. We can't be complacent. I mean, I think of that quote from Edmund Burke. He stated that the only thing for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, and we cannot sit on the sidelines and watch this dictatorship come our way, because if we stay complacent, if we choose not to be proactive in this fight, we're letting them in the door. And that's the whole battle at hand here. So many people are just saying, oh, I'll let that other guy do something. I'll let other people do it. I'll let other people fight the fight. No, we have to be banded together and be diligent in this right now, because it is a real agenda coming our way. And if we stay complacent, if we conform to the world, we're going to let that evil in our door.
Well, listen, the past, I grew up, I'm 30 years old. I grew up in the 90s. Don't remember all this gender dysphoria stuff going on. Never heard really about this DEI stuff. The open border stuff was not even close to what it is now. Everybody that is white is Satan. The racism is everywhere right now. Freedom of speech has been, deteriorating, but really went down the tubes from 2020 even beyond. And obviously, freedom of religion, due to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is going downhill because if you're a Jewish, you're Satan too. So, what happened in the country? Because again, as you stated, this didn't start in 2020. This is not just a Democratic issue. This is both parties. I know we hear a lot about the uniparty now, and I don't know if you subscribe to that or if this is just some spiritual warfare, as we've been talking about in the first part of this interview, that's going on. And there's going to be a lot of people, as there were with the shot, that fell into this trap of satanic behavior. And there was a lot, group of people that didn't, and they're going to again try this again. It might be the bird flu. We'll talk about that in just a second. But what happened to the country, because we never saw all this stuff go haywire as it is now.
Well, first of all, we lost our compass. We lost our
Yeah.
true north. People have abandoned, I believe we have taken God out of schools. We've taken,
Right.
God out of the home. Our government has grown out of its scope of practice, out of the realms of the Constitution. You look at past former presidential candidates like Mitt Romney saying that he doesn't understand the Constitution because he's not an attorney. I'm like, well, my 8-year-old son can understand the principles of the Constitution. And we've abandoned these principles. We've abandoned what makes this our country great and sovereign, and that is understanding the greatest of minorities who we need to defend with everything we have, and that's the individual. We need to understand that the greatest of minorities is the individual, and those liberties and freedoms are very important. But our government and people have had more faith in our government now than God. We have to put faith back in God and bring him back to the rightful place here. And people are believing these ideological, how do you say it? These ideologies that are completely backwards, and they're not leading us to a sovereign nation. They're not leading us to freedoms and liberties, and we have priorities on this LGBTQ movement and whatever it is, and it's like it's and it this and it's and and we need to get back to the I don't know, understanding the greatest of minorities is the individual. But the
Right.
problem is we have this ideological thinking that it's like, oh, it's for the greater good. We need to do what the majority says. And it's like, we're not a democracy here. This is not a democracy. This is a constitutional republic. And getting back to that is absolutely essential. And it's like, if you want to live your life, I will fight for your right to live your life, and and I'll fight for your right to the death for you to have freedom of speech and for those things. But right now we're in a time where people don't value those principles anymore. They don't value those freedoms. And we're not going to value those freedoms till they're gone. And that's the problem. We are sacrificing freedom and liberty for security, or in the name of health. I mean, look at COVID. We gave up essential freedoms in our Constitution for safety and for health reasons, and that's not okay. We have 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. We have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to form an assembly, freedom to petition the government, and freedom of press.
There
And
you
all those
go.
freedoms were under attack. And that's actually a sanction of war. When our freedoms of speech are under attack, then that's absolutely a sanction of war. And look at during COVID, we couldn't even talk about certain things. The V word was censored. I mean, you look at the jibby jabbies. We have to use code words so we can infiltrate these social media platforms without being shadow banned. But it's a real thing. And it's, I was taken down 6 times on Instagram. And censorship is a real thing. And I got into a debate with an MD, and he laughed in my face saying that the censorship that's conspiracy. That's not a real thing. And I laughed. I said, what planet are you on? You know what I mean? They called for
Yeah.
the deplatforming on a White House press secretary meeting. They said the disinformation doesn't need to be deplatformed for speaking. They said it was hate speech when they deemed it misinformation. I said, "Are you kidding me? This is the world we live in. I mean, I have a right to be able to speak, excuse me, what I believe to be true, and that is
Right.
my constitutional right." And so Whether a person disagrees with it or not, it doesn't matter. It's my right. It's my freedom to do so. And this is where this is a slippery slope, because people have been they're adopting this ideology that is going to eradicate our freedoms and liberties. But the problem is, the scary thing is that they're blinded to it. And we need to be able to protect our freedom of speech. We need to protect our doctor-patient relationship, because that is something that's going to be eroding right now. And we're seeing that during
Yeah.
times of COVID, how many doctors were persecuted and have lost their license because they're prescribing ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. This is a real thing. We need to be able to protect that doctor-patient relationship now more than ever before, because we have a government entity in these three-letter organizations that have infiltrated and are perverting. And not only that, they're funneling in their ideological protocols that are completely not congruent, but actually are having contradictions with what some of these doctors were recommending. And the doctors that were going against the grain were persecuted.
Well, they also made this political. If you remember, with the vaccine, when Trump, with Operation Warp Speed, when he was going to put it out before the election, the Democrats, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden said, we wouldn't take that vaccine. Don't take that vaccine. It's the same vaccine. And then all of a sudden, when, Trump gets out, they come in, the vaccine's God's gift to the world. And you got to take it. If you don't take it, you lose your job, you lose your livelihood. The list goes on and on. So they made it political. And again, as a person that was very far to the left, like myself, that's what happened to me. It wasn't only that it was political, it was also that I had people in my life that believed in what I believed in. They, disagreed with what was going on with me in my body with the adverse reactions. And they said that it was all about, your mind and taking all these depression medications. And I didn't believe that was true. I had a doc that told me to get a third shot, and my symptoms, in his correct words as a doctor, my symptoms would magically disappear. Sounded like a Disney movie, that
Right.
somebody would say something like that. So that's what happened in 2020. And that woke myself up and many other people not to vote for people that were pushing the lies that I had voted for constantly. I want to continue on with this conversation on COVID, but since you brought up the LBGTQ group, you were on InfoWars with Alex Stein a year or so back, maybe. And I remember watching it. You spoke about the gender dysphoria and that's relationship with the injections that most kids get throughout their lives and even adults. Can you talk about the injections and how you believe that the gender dysphoria is coming about due to the injections?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great question, because, 10, 15 years ago, every time we got on this topic of the vaccine schedule and whatnot, and I would start
Mhm.
educating people, I'm like, well, you guys want to hear something crazy? And I would only really tell this to people. And I would say, listen, this is going to be to the forefront here eventually. And now it is. Gender dysphoria is a real thing here it's in conversations now more than ever before. And it used to be, you know, hardly few far between. Okay. But there is an epigenetic influence, make no mistake, to these uh, vaccines, and especially with the ingredients in these. Because if you look at the ingredient list and really break it down, which so many people are blind to, they have no idea. If you were to ask 99.99999% of the population, give me 3 ingredients to a vaccine or hepatitis B or whatever it may be, they couldn't tell me anything. They could not tell me an ingredient. And if you were to look at the aborted cell lines that are in these inoculations, you're going to find like WI38, Windsor Institute 38. Why do they call it Windsor Institute 38? Because it took 38 abortions to create that cell line. Okay, look at HEK 293. Why 293? It took 293 abortions to get that right cell line. People say, well, that's not true. It's all conspiracy. Okay, then go look at the 9-hour deposition that was put on by Stanley Plotkin. That is 100%, you know, real. It was a deposition. Stanley Plotkin is known as the godfather of vaccines. He was brought in for an expert witness because the mom and the husband that he was being an expert witness to were getting a divorce, and the husband wanted to vaccinate the kids and the mom did not. Well, the mom was a pissed off mama bear and was like, I am not going to be listening to, or I'm not going to vaccinate my kids, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to bring in um, Stanley Plotkin because this is the reason why X, Y, and Z, and it had a lot to do with the abortal fetal cell lines. And so Stanley Plotkin admitted, yes, thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of abortions are occurring, and we're done to get these cell lines. They call them immortal cell lines. Well, they say, well, it's from one abortion from the 60s, and it's an immortal cell line that we don't do current abortions, and we just, you know, it's one of those things where it's a reoccurring. No abortions are created for these cell lines, and it's safe. And even the Pope says, yeah, it's good. Yeah, let's do it, right? But the problem is, you know, we have abortions that are used in the production, manufacturing, and the development of these vaccines currently. I mean, and Planned Parenthood, in my opinion, and the vaccine industry are one and the same. Okay. And so you look at these aborted cell lines. Let's just take WI38, Windsor Institute, for example, 38. Okay. They'll tell you it's an immortal cell line from a 3-month-old gestational fetus from a female, and it's a lung tissue, right? Now, you have to understand epigenetics in order to understand this. Okay, so epigenetics basically means that your body's going to adapt its physiology to meet the environment that it's in, whether it's good or bad, and is based off what we call allostatic load. So let's say, you know, you go to the gym. And you put your body under stresses. Okay, so if you put the bicep under stresses, you're lifting weights, your bicep is under allostatic load, and your body's going to start changing that physiology to handle that load, to meet the load it's under, right? So and you're going to start developing muscle, and you're going to be stronger, and you're going to be able to handle more stress and be able to lift more, right? That's just epigenetics in a nutshell. Well, your body's no different. If I play guitar, my body's going to start changing the physiological responses on my fingertips, and it's going to start to harden. I'm going to start to develop calluses, right? So that I'll be able to play guitar longer. Okay, that's just epigenetic influences. Now, if I were to inject a newborn with WI38 during the developmental stages of the nervous system, so if we go in and we inject these cell lines into a developing nervous system, so during the first 2 years of life, you have a developmental stage in the nervous system called exuberant neurosynaptogenesis. Okay, so exuberant neurosynaptogenesis. That means that the neurons are firing, they're growing, your brain is developing. Your brain is the master control organ, right? It controls every cell, every tissue, every organ in the body. Now, when we inject these cell lines into the nervous system at a developing rate here, these vaccines can go in and they go into the skin barrier, okay? And what this does, it actually bypasses the way God made your immune system. And, you know, if you look at the CDC and all these three-letter organizations, they're going to tell you that it takes 2 weeks to create the antibodies that they're targeting for, that they're looking for from the vaccine. So what happens, you get this antibody response immediately from an immunoglobulin E. And immunoglobulin E is really the key factor of the immunoglobulins or the antibodies. So we have different antibodies, and I'm sorry if I go down too nerdy here, but hopefully you're following me. But the different antibodies that we have are immunoglobulin E, G, A, M. Okay, there's a couple more, but we have immunoglobulin E that's triggered immediately after a vaccine, because they'll tell you that we have a little bit of inflammation at the injection site, and they'll tell you that's normal. But what happens is that once we have immunoglobulin E, we have inflammation, and once we have inflammation, we have histamine. And histamine is the key chemical here, because what happens when we have histamine released in the body, it opens the blood-brain barrier, okay, and it allows for these like ingredients like WI38 or these other abortal fetal cell lines or aluminum nanoparticles or MSG or whatever they put in these vaccines that enter into the nervous system, and that's why you're seeing a lot of these autoimmune, you see a lot of these neurological developmental delays, disorders, these inflammatory issues occur. But the thing is that when you inject the WI38, it's my hypothesis that it's going to have epigenetic influences on the developing nervous system, causing dysphoria. Now, if you look at WI38, it's a female cell line. What happens from an epigenetic standpoint when you inject that into a male's body during the exuberant neurosynaptogenesis, the developmental stages of the nervous system? What epigenetic influences are those orbital cell lines going to have what kind of effect is that going to have on the developing nervous system from an epigenetic standpoint? So that is my hypothesis, and I believe it's true. It's really not even a hypothesis. It's just, it's going to have an effect, and it's not even a theory. And you're seeing that. You're seeing this explosion of dysphoria occurring at a rapid rate. And are there other factors? Absolutely. I mean, you look at that. What is that, astrazine or whatever that chemical was that was found
Yeah,
in
with the frogs,
the,
right.
the frogs. You're seeing that. I mean, it changed the genetic makeup, the epigenetic makeup of the frogs that were expressing female cells. So maybe that has something to do with it too. And there are environmental factors. Look at the soy, the explosion of soy, the modification of our soy, and how that's changed our, the estrogen levels astronomically. I mean, from once we started modifying soy, you have now 96% of our soy has been modified. Look at the phytoestrogen in the soy. It is an explosion. I mean, look at the gynecomastia that's occurring from the high soy diets, which is the man boob syndrome. I mean, you're
Right.
seeing our testosterone decrease from the 70s. I think overall, from on average, 50% across the board. Why do we have an explosion of this decreased testosterone in men? I think that is all by design, and so that can be a whole nother rabbit hole. But you asked me about the gender dysphoria and the
Yeah.
correlation between the vaccinations, and so I, it's um, that is my take on it. And I think we have to look at this elephant in the room, and you have to understand, why are we seeing this explosion of this gender affirmation surgery centers all across the nation? And why is Big Pharma pushing this? Because I believe that they know what they're doing. I believe that they know what they're pushing, what these vaccines are doing. And I believe full well, if the people knew what they were doing, it would cause a revolution overnight.
Well, they're injecting, with these foreign substances. And also, as you said, with the food, there's glyphosate. I know Robert F. Kennedy talks about this a lot in his podcast, on his campaign. Also spoke about the frog issue. And it makes you think, Doc, too. Everything now that's being called a conspiracy theory seems like it's came out as true, especially in the past 4 years. We've seen this throughout COVID, where people have really woken up and questioned everything, unless they're living again in this hysteria where I was there. It's very hard to get out. But I want to talk about this because when we talk about the turbo cancers, and we had Dr. William Mackis on months back. I know he was involved with the wellness company for a little bit, and he's over in Canada. But there's new talk about ivermectin. Obviously, ivermectin, the Nobel Peace Prize winning drug, it is a wonder drug that's being tested to treat cancer. It was in the Epoch Times. They had a big story on that. Do you believe that that could be helping a lot of people now with cancer, instead of going through the vicious chemo cycle and looking at a very mild drug such as ivermectin?
Well, I don't. I mean, believing is knowing. So, do I believe and do I know that it is? Yes, absolutely. I mean,
Okay,
this drug has been around. It's a tried and true drug. I mean, it's won
sure.
awards, and it is a powerful drug. It's an anti-parasitic drug, which can maybe correlate to why we're having this rise in cancers, and are they parasitic in nature? I mean, you
Mm.
have to look at, why is ivermectin helping so many people?
COVID-19 vaccination, and here's why. This isn't about gimmicks or sentiment or what commercial I like. This is about facts. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Millions of doses have already been given in the United States, and these vaccines have the most intensive safety monitoring in U.S. history. When you need more information, Use a reliable source like the CDC website and get the facts.
While we would all love to leave COVID-19 behind, the virus is still here and making some people very sick, especially older adults. The new updated COVID-19 vaccine is the most effective way to give your body the ability to keep the COVID virus from causing you harm. That's why CDC recommends everyone 6 months and older get 1 dose of the updated COVID-19 vaccine ahead of the fall and winter season. This recommendation was based on extensive data and clinical trials. As a doctor, a mom, a wife, a daughter, and head of the CDC, I would not recommend anything to others that I wouldn't recommend for my own family. That's why my 9 and 11-year-old daughters, my husband, my parents, and I will all be rolling up our sleeves to get our updated COVID-19 vaccine. I encourage you to get your own updated COVID vaccine and make sure everyone in your family who's 6 months and older does so as well. Don't forget, it's also a good time to get your flu shot if you haven't already. Check vaccines.gov to find a location near you and get your vaccine. And if you have any questions about the vaccine, please talk to your doctor.